Rich men kicked his wife and daughter out of the house. Years later, he saw his daughter on TV. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Alice's childhood and youth were spent under the watchful eye of her single mother. Her mother had clear expectations and rarely left room for Alice to explore her own desires. By the time Alice reached her final year of college, she was introduced to Martin, a man her mother had deemed suitable. Although Alice didn't feel a strong connection to him, she agreed to marry him, having grown accustomed to following her mother's wishes. Martin came from a wealthy family, and Alice's mother assured her that she would live a comfortable, carefree life with him. And indeed, Alice didn't lack anything materially. But nothing really changed after the marriage. Except now, it was Martin who controlled her every move. He provided well for their family, but he also imposed numerous restrictions on her. The one thing Alice managed to hold on to was her passion for painting, which she pursued by teaching art classes at a local community center. As time passed, Alice realized that Martin saw her as little more than a convenient wife. His parents had pressured him to marry, threatening to cut him off financially if he didn't settle down. So, he chose Alice, a quiet and compliant woman who would not challenge him. She kept the house in order, prepared meals, but often found herself eating alone as Martin would frequently return home late, long after she had gone to bed. The first time Alice truly felt happiness was when she held her newborn daughter, Ella. In that moment, she understood what it meant to be fulfilled. However, this joy was soon overshadowed by the challenges of raising a child with little support. Martin's parents lived abroad, so they only saw their granddaughter through photographs. Meanwhile, Alice's mother told her that since she had chosen this path, she was on her own. Martin became increasingly irritable after Ella was born, especially when the baby's cries disturbed his sleep. Alice, now juggling the demands of motherhood and her art classes, often struggled to keep up with the household chores. This led to frequent arguments, with Martin raising his voice and lashing out. Little Ella would wake up crying, adding to the chaos. Desperate, Alice called her mother, expressing her desire to leave Martin. But her mother's response was cold. "You chose this life. Don't come running back to me." Alice's brother, who was staying with their mother to build his career, was also a source of tension. Her mother insisted that Alice already had everything she needed, unlike her brother, who was still striving for success. During these difficult moments, Alice found solace in her daughter. Looking at Ella's innocent face, she would whisper, "We'll be leaving soon, my darling. Just a little longer." She began saving money in secret, skimping on groceries and buying only what was absolutely necessary. Martin rarely gave her cash, preferring to handle all expenses himself, so she had to be resourceful. One day, after another sleepless night caring for a sick Ella, Martin returned home around 11 a.m., accompanied by a younger woman, heavily made up. He looked at Alice with disdain and said, "Alice, this is what a real wife should look like. Have you even brushed your hair today?" Alice stood in silence. She knew that no matter what she said, it wouldn't make a difference. "Pack your things and take Ella with you. There's going to be a new lady of the house, someone I'm not ashamed to show off to my friends," Martin added, his voice dripping with contempt. He warned her that she shouldn't expect much in the way of alimony, as his parents controlled the business and could easily manipulate the financial records. Alice felt a mix of relief and sadness. She knew she was finally free from Martin, but the thought of facing her mother again filled her with dread. As she packed, she called her mother, hoping for some support, but instead was met with harsh words. "Martin's right," her mother said. "You should take better care of yourself. And don't think for a second that you can come back here." Alice packed most of Ella's belongings into a small suitcase and grabbed a few of her own things. As she finished, Ella, holding her beloved stuffed bunny, approached her and said, "Mom, I heard everything. I'm ready." Alice hugged her daughter tightly. "You're so brave, my little one. Let's go." As they were leaving, Martin called out, "Leave me your address so I can send the rest of your stuff. The cleaning lady will pack it up tomorrow." Alice replied curtly, "Send it to my work." She was relieved that at least the kind-hearted cleaning lady, Mrs. Evans, would be the one handling her things. After leaving the house, Alice called Mrs. Evans, who promised to pack up the remaining items and mentioned that she knew of a friend who was renting a small studio apartment. Grateful, Alice and Ella headed to the address. The landlady was a kind elderly woman who, after hearing Alice's story, initially didn't want to accept rent. However, Alice insisted, assuring her that she had some savings and a job. Settling into their new home, Alice found herself in a small but warm and welcoming environment. Mrs. Evans often watched over Ella while Alice worked, and Alice would clean the apartment and sometimes cook meals for everyone. For the first time in years, Alice felt at home, surrounded by kindness, respect, and mutual support. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alice and Ella went to the park to gather materials for a craft project Ella's kindergarten had assigned. They collected leaves, acorns, and twigs, filling a small bag. As they sat on a bench, Alice said, "We did a great job. Now we just need to figure out what to make." A male voice chimed in from nearby. "You could make an owl from the leaves. I used to do that as a kid, and a hedgehog with the acorns." Alice turned to see a man smiling at them. "Thanks for the idea. We've gathered so much, we could share with you if you'd like." The man shook his head with a smile. "Thanks, but I don't have any children." Alice, surprised, continued, "I just assumed because you remembered the owl." The man explained, "When I was a child, my mother and I used to come to this park all the time. We'd collect things just like this and make crafts together." The man introduced himself as Daniel. He was a musician, just like Alice, though he played the violin. They soon discovered many shared interests and began spending their weekends together in the park. Daniel would play with Ella and talk to Alice, making her feel lighter and happier. As winter approached, their friendship deepened. They spent time together enjoying the winter activities, and Ella, noticing their bond, asked her mother, "Mom, why doesn't Daniel ever come to visit us? I told Mrs. Evans about him, and she doesn't mind." Daniel always walked them home but never imposed on Alice by visiting her apartment. Alice was reluctant to invite him, feeling embarrassed about her past and her current situation. But on their next walk, Ella invited Daniel over, and he accepted. To Alice's surprise, Daniel didn't judge her when she eventually shared her story. A year passed, and their friendship grew stronger. They continued their weekend outings, and one day, while they were in the park, Alice gathered the courage to speak her heart. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I can't keep silent anymore. I love you." She looked into his eyes, hoping for a positive response. Daniel's expression softened, but there was sadness in his eyes. "Alice, there's something I need to tell you. It's the reason we can't be together." Confused, Alice asked, "Is there someone else? Or are you worried about our age difference?" He shook his head. "No, it's not that. A year ago, when we first met, I had just come from the doctor. I was diagnosed with a serious illness, and I was told I didn't have much time left. I underwent treatment, but it was too late. The doctors gave me 6 months. Meeting you and Ella extended my life beyond that, but I don't know how much longer I have." Alice was at a loss for words. After a pause, Daniel continued, "Now that you know, will you find time for me tomorrow afternoon?" She nodded, unable to speak. The rest of their walk was spent in silence. The next day, Daniel picked up Alice from work and took her to a notary. Alice didn't pay much attention to what she was signing. Her thoughts were elsewhere. After they left, Daniel said, "Move into my house, which is now also yours. I won't have much time to give you and Ella the love and attention you deserve, but at least I can leave you with a home and some savings, though most of it went to my treatments." Alice and Ella moved in with Daniel the following day. A week later, Daniel was admitted to the hospital, and Mrs. Evans moved in to help care for Ella. Alice spent most of her time at the hospital, with Mrs. Evans bringing Ella to visit once a day. A month passed, and Daniel knew his time was running out. One day, he softly said, "Alice, you have to promise me something." Alice sat closer, listening intently. "Promise me that you and Ella will find happiness. Don't be afraid to let someone else into your life." And never let anyone treat you the way Martin did. Alice, tears in her eyes, nodded and whispered, "I promise." Daniel passed away shortly after, and his funeral was attended by the entire orchestra he had played with. 40 days later, a concert was held in his memory, where Ella took the stage and played his favorite piece on the piano. 6 years later, Mrs. Evans was busy in the kitchen preparing a special dinner. Ella had just won a regional music competition, and they were expecting Alice, Ella, and David to return home soon. Alice had found love again in David, and Ella now called him Dad. They spent the evening watching clips of Ella's performance on TV, bursting with pride. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Martin sat alone, watching the same program. His parents had removed him from the family business, realizing that he was running it into the ground. The young woman he had left Alice for had long since disappeared, taking a significant amount of his money with her. Now he was alone, watching the news and feeling a strange sense of familiarity when he saw Ella on the screen, though he couldn't quite place why. As the award ceremony played out, Ella proudly said, "I dedicate this victory to Daniel, who gave my mother and me faith in life after my father's betrayal." Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.